Happy New Year, and a very warm welcome back to Sip&Talk. Whether it's your morning, noon, or night, we are so glad to have you.
Welcome back, Sip&Talkers.
Okay, so we got such incredible feedback on that deep dive we did late last year, EP546, about who is the real China.
Yeah, that one really seemed to hit a nerve in a good way.
It really did. A lot of you said we made a super complex topic feel, understandable. But I have to be honest, the credit, it's not really ours.
Oh, do tell. I didn't realize you were a fan of foreign ministry press conferences now.
No, not exactly. But it's because they're the ones who inspired this whole topic. They keep emphasizing, almost daily, this idea that there is only one China.
Right. It's a constant refrain.
And I was listening to this and it just clicked. I thought, wait a minute, if something is a solid, undeniable fact, you don't need to repeat it every single day.
You don't have to keep telling people the sky is blue.
Exactly. The fact that they have to say it so often is what made me start to wonder, is it possible there are two?
Well, that's the beautiful irony of language when it's used by, power structures. When any authority has to constantly hammer home a fact, it usually means that fact is being challenged.
It's a tell.
It's a huge tell. The more they repeat it, the more they're kind of pointing a big flashing arrow at their own insecurity about it.
It reminds me so much of that story our friend Mickey told us about his old job.
Oh, this one's a classic.
So his manager, gets the whole office together one day looking super serious, and he announces, effective immediately, smoking is strictly forbidden on the office balcony.
And Mickey's reaction was perfect.
He just paused for a second, turned to his coworker and whispered, "Wait, you mean we could smoke on the balcony this whole time? I had no idea."
So the manager, in an attempt to shut something down, actually just advertised a secret company perk to the entire staff.
Yes, and psychologically that feels a lot like that. Was it called the white bear effect?
The white bear effect, yeah. Don't think about a white bear.
No, what's the only thing in your head?
A polar bear, probably on a unicycle. It just completely takes over.
Exactly. So that's what we're digging into today. This whole phenomenon that Shakespeare summed up so perfectly in Hamlet. The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Right. It's that feeling you get when someone's denial is just a little too intense. You accuse someone of taking the last cookie, and they launch into this huge speech. I absolutely did not, I swear on my life.
And you just think, you protest too much. It was definitely you. It's that the more you deny it, the more I believe it kind of thing.
And what's so fascinating, and what we're going to explore, is how this isn't just about off politics or cookies. You see it everywhere in AI regulation, in the U.S.-China tech trade war.
Oh, absolutely.
When a company or a country shouts from the rooftops, "We have an absolute lead," or "There is zero government interference," that's usually the exact moment you should start looking at the data, because it often points in the complete opposite direction.
We have so many incredible examples to unpack for you today. This is going to be a good one.
It is, so grab your coffee.
Okay, so let's really unpack the psychology of this first, because I feel like it's the engine behind all the geopolitical stuff we're going to get into. We mentioned the white bear effect.
Right. We had to lay the groundwork. The white bear phenomenon, its formal name is ironic process theory. It comes from this really famous experiment in the 80s by a psychologist named Daniel Wegner.
And the idea is pretty simple, right?
It's deceptively simple. When you tell someone to actively suppress a thought, the very act of trying to suppress it is what guarantees it's going to come back, and often come back stronger.
So if I'm sitting here trying not to think about, a bright pink flamingo, I'm actually doing two things at once in my brain.
Exactly, and that's the brilliant part of the theory. Your brain splits into two systems that are fighting each other.
Right.
First, you've got the conscious part, the intentional suppression. That's you actively thinking, okay, no flamingos, think about anything else, work, taxes, anything.
The hard work part.
The effortful part. But at the exact same time, there's this other process running in the background, automatically. It's called the ironic monitoring process.
Ironic why?
Because its only job is to scan your mind for the very thing you're trying to avoid. It's like a little security guard in your head constantly whispering, "Are we thinking about the flamingo yet? How about now? Any flamingos?"
So the checking just becomes a constant reminder of the flamingo.
It keeps the thought right at the front of your mind, highly accessible. So when you get tired or stressed or distracted, your willpower, that intentional suppression part, it gets weaker.
And the little security guard wins.
The monitoring process wins, and you get what's called the rebound effect. The pink flamingo comes roaring back, more vivid than ever. The mechanism for suppression literally becomes the mechanism for reinforcement. It explains why just telling yourself, stop thinking about this, never works. But, okay, that's just a thought. Let's add the next layer, which is where it gets, I think, really relevant for our topic, when the forbidden thing starts to seem attractive.
Right. Now we're moving from just the thought returning to the forbidden fruit effect. This is rooted in something called reactance theory.
Okay, so what's reactance?
Reactance is what happens when that suppressed thing doesn't just come back, it comes back with a new shine on it. It gains desirability.
So you don't just think about the pink flamingo, now you kind of want a lawn full of them.
Precisely. It's a defense mechanism. When our freedom of choice feels threatened by some authority, a boss, a government, a parent, our brain kicks into gear to reassert our autonomy.
It's the you can't tell me what to do instinct. It is. And the easiest way to prove you can't tell me what to do is to go and do the very thing you were told not to. Suddenly, that forbidden action becomes incredibly appealing, not because of what it is, but because choosing it feels like winning back your freedom.
Like the classic example of a kid in a playroom. You could have 100 amazing toys, but the second you point to one and say, don't play with that one.
That is the only toy that exists in the universe to that child. Their entire mission becomes getting that one toy. It's not about the toy anymore. It's about the freedom to choose.
And what about the Romeo and Juliet effect? Is that related?
It's the perfect example. Parental opposition to a relationship often just pours gasoline on the fire. The couple feels like they're not just fighting for each other, they're fighting for their right to choose their own autonomy. It makes the bond feel even more important.
So the big takeaway here before we dive into the global stuff is that we're basically wired to see a do not enter sign and immediately think, I wonder what's in there.
We instinctively assume that if something is prohibited, it must be valuable, or it must be a hidden truth. Otherwise, why would anyone in power go to the trouble of banning it? And that is the exact lens we need to use when we look at everything from trade sanctions to new regulations.
Let's make this super relatable for a second, because companies are absolute masters at using this against us in consumer marketing.
Oh, it's the entire business model for some brands. Scarcity and marketing are the perfect playground for the forbidden fruit effect.
You just have to look at a brand like Supreme. Their entire empire is built not really on the quality of a t-shirt, but on making it almost impossible to get.
Right. The limited edition drops, the lines around the block, the one per customer rules. The moment something is artificially scarce or forbidden, its perceived value, especially its social value, just skyrockets.
You're not just buying a sweatshirt, you're buying the victory of having gotten the thing that was hard to get.
You've overcome the prohibition. And you see the same thing, weirdly, with public health warnings.
Which are obviously well-intentioned, but they can backfire so badly.
Especially with certain groups, like teenagers. You slap a huge graphic warning label on a pack of cigarettes. The intention is to disgust and deter. But for someone in a rebellious phase, that warning label can act like an advertisement.
It makes the product look dangerous or adult.
Exactly. It feeds that reactance. The government is telling me this is bad, so doing it feels like an act of rebellion and assertion of my own choice. The warning itself makes it seem more exciting.
And the most painful everyday example for so many people is the dieting paradox.
Oh, we've all been there. You wake up Monday morning, that's it. For the whole month, absolutely no chocolate.
And then what happens?
The only thing you can think about is chocolate. That intentional suppression, don't think about chocolate, it immediately triggers the ironic monitor. Hey, are we thinking about chocolate yet?
And your entire mental energy is just consumed by this internal battle over a candy bar until you're stressed or tired by Friday and you have a massive rebound binge, eating way more chocolate than you would have if you just allowed yourself a small piece in the first place.
Yeah.
The prohibition created the craving. It's just so clear. Telling someone no is often the most powerful form of encouragement. Okay, that's a perfect foundation.
So now how does this same dynamic, this weird push and pull of control and rebellion play out when we're not talking about one person's brain, but about, say, the entire global tech industry in AI?
You see the exact same pattern of really self-defeating prohibition when it comes to AI governance. You have governments all over the world trying to juggle two opposing goals.
Which are?
On one hand, you need rapid innovation. You have to keep up or your economy falls behind. But on the other hand, there's this desperate desire for control because everyone is terrified of what could go wrong.
And this has led to this constant drumbeat about AI safety. But the more they talk about it, the more it creates what some are calling a transparency paradox. The more loudly a company or a government insists that they are making AI safe, the more suspicious people become, and the more opaque the systems actually seem to get. Their constant reassurance is the white bear. They're trying to suppress the public's fear that AI is a runaway train, but all the talk about safety just makes us think about the train wreck.
It feels like the U.S. model of self-regulation is a perfect example. It's almost designed to manage public perception rather than actually allow for real oversight.
That's a very fair read. The U.S. approach generally favors companies policing themselves, with regulators only stepping in after something goes wrong, what they call ex post accountability. But this whole model relies on trusting the companies, and their data handling raises some huge red flags.
Like the allegations in that big lawsuit a major newspaper filed against an AI lab where they claimed conversation records were deleted.
Right. If data is being handled that way, especially under the pressure of a lawsuit, how can the public have any confidence in these, club-level private agreements on safety between a few tech giants? Who are they really protecting?
The protest is, we can handle this ourselves. But the reality seems to be a deep lack of transparency. The white bear they're trying to suppress is the fear of their own inconvenient data getting out.
Now let's contrast that with China's approach, which is the complete opposite. It's the ultimate in-state control with their algorithm filing system.
Okay, so what does that entail?
It's run by the Cyberspace Administration of China, the CCC, and it's incredibly strict. Companies have to literally register their algorithms with the government, supposedly to make sure they're safe and the content is appropriate.
On the surface, that sounds like maximum transparency.
For the government, yes. The regulator gets to see everything. But as reporting from places like The Economist has pointed out, this transparency is a one-way street. It's only for the state.
Not for the public.
For the public, the AI's core logic, how it filters content, what it promotes, what it buries, that all remains a total black box, but one that is now explicitly government approved.
So when the state says AI must be safe and controllable, the real question is safe for whom? Is it user safety or is the security the state's narrative?
And the evidence really points to narrative security. I mean, the official requirement that all AI systems must reflect socialist core values is the biggest tell there is. It's basically a giant neon sign that says this AI has been politically sanitized. The white bear they're so afraid of is an AI that thinks for itself and challenges the official story.
Let's get even more specific. There was this huge push for AI watermarks. This was supposed to be the big technical fix for misinformation.
Yes, this was the great promise. The official line from companies like Google, with their Synthi tool or the whole industry coalition behind the C2PA standard, was that they could embed invisible cryptographic watermarks in AI images.
And C2PA, just for our listeners, what is that exactly?
It stands for the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. Think of it like a secure digital birth certificate attached to a file. It's supposed to show you where the image came from, how it was made, and if it's been tampered with. It was pitched as the ultimate weapon against deepfakes.
A promise of robust evidence.
A promise that fell apart almost immediately. Researchers discovered that these so-called safety watermarks were shockingly fragile.
What do you mean by fragile?
I mean simple, everyday actions could destroy them. Things like recompressing an image, which happens all the time when you upload it to social media, or even just applying a basic photo filter, was often enough to completely wipe the watermark.
So the robust evidence just vanishes.
It evaporates. And the irony here is just, it's incredible. First, it gives the corporations the legal out. They can say, hey, we marked it as AI. If you erase the mark, that's on you.
Right, our hands are clean.
But the deeper irony, and this is the white bear effect playing out in the tech world, is that this big push for a secure, unbeatable watermark, this ban on unverified AI content, it just became a challenge, a kind of technical bounty for the entire open source community.
So the attempt to lock the system down just motivated the exact people they were trying to control.
100%. You have all these brilliant developers on platforms like GitHub who saw the industry's claims and thought, oh, really? Unbeatable. The forbidden fruit instinct just kicked right in. It wasn't even about creating deepfakes. It was about the pure technical challenge of breaking the code.
Proving it could be done.
Exactly. The prohibition itself directly stimulated the creation of the counter-technology. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment you declare your technology is foolproof, you've just issued a global, irresistible challenge to a million smart people to go prove you wrong.
Okay, so let's take this filter, this idea that protesting too much reveals the weak spot, and hold it up to the world of international relations. The language here is so carefully chosen, but the over-protest still gives away the game.
Diplomacy is famous for being about what's not said. But when a point gets repeated over and over and over, it acts like a giant spotlight on the core issue. We saw this all the time during the Cold War.
Right, with both sides just constantly repeating slogans, things like peaceful coexistence or defending the free world.
And the effect of hearing that constantly wasn't reassurance. It just reinforced the image of an ever-present existential threat. If you had to keep yelling about how peaceful everything is, it just makes everyone think that war must be right around the corner.
The thing they were trying to suppress, the White Bear, was the fear of total nuclear annihilation.
It was. And maybe the best historical example of this anxiety showing up in word choice is the Shanghai Communique back in 1972.
This was a huge deal for U.S.-China relations.
Monumental. They were trying to bridge this enormous gap. And when it came to the most sensitive issue, Taiwan, the U.S. side chose its words with surgical precision. They said the U.S. acknowledges the Chinese position that Taiwan is part of China.
Crucially, they didn't say recognizes.
They did not. And that distinction, that single verb choice, was everything. Acknowledges is much weaker, less legally binding than recognizes. It maintained what's called strategic ambiguity.
But all the debate that came after was about that one word.
For decades, the endless, heated diplomatic arguments over the difference between acknowledges and recognizes guaranteed that the unresolved status of Taiwan would remain the absolute focal point of the relationship. By trying to downplay their level of agreement with a single word, they ended up magnifying the disagreement for the whole world to see. It's a perfect example of protesting too much about what you don't agree on and making that the whole story. So let's bring it to today's tech war. China's big push for chip self-sufficiency. This might be the clearest, most current example of the white bear effect in geopolitics. The official declarations coming from Beijing are massive, constant proclamations about their rapid progress in domestic substitution for semiconductors.
The stated national goal is to master critical core technologies.
Right. And they're throwing billions in subsidies at it. It's this powerful story of impending technological independence.
But the data on the ground tells a very different story.
A story of really acute vulnerability. The U.S. export controls, especially on the most advanced AI chips, the NVIDIA H100s and H200s, they created an immediate and very severe compute bottleneck. The hardware needed to train the biggest AI models just wasn't legally available.
And this isn't just an outside observation. Chinese companies themselves are admitting this is a problem.
They are. Major Chinese AI players, including companies like DeepSeek and Huawei, have said publicly that the lack of access to these specific top-tier chips is their single biggest constraint. It means they have to use way more energy and far more of their less efficient domestic chips to try and get similar results.
So the louder they proclaim self-reliance,
the more it highlights just how dependent they still are on a few key technologies controlled by the U.S. The protest reveals the vulnerability.
And this is where the forbidden fruit effect kicks in, because the ban was meant to stop the flow of technology, but it seems to have just created two new unintended outcomes.
It really did. The first was the black market. The second these chips were banned, you saw reports from the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, confirming that these really sophisticated smuggling networks had popped up.
And these aren't small-time operations.
Not at all. These are refined, complex routes using small trading companies, often moving through the Middle East or Southeast Asia, specifically to get around the controls and get these forbidden chips into China. The ban created a massive profit incentive for smugglers.
So the prohibition just made the fruit more valuable, and then it also acted as this inverse stimulation, right? It accelerated their own effort.
Exactly. It created a do-or-die situation for domestic investment in their own alternatives, like Huawei's Afend chips or SMIC's manufacturing. And we know they're still anxious because of how they advertise their successes.
What do you mean?
Every time they announce a new domestic chip or claim to have broken the blockade, it's done with this huge media fanfare. If the blockade wasn't a genuine threat, they wouldn't need to celebrate breaking it so loudly. Their own PR underscores their anxiety about the supply gap. That gap is their white bear. Let's look at another one, maybe a more visual example. The South China Sea. Oh, this is a textbook case. You have the diplomatic protest clashing directly with the satellite photos. China's foreign ministry insists repeatedly that the artificial islands they've built are entirely for civilian needs.
And they insist there's no militarization.
That was a major promise made back in 2015. It's the manager saying, we're just using the balcony for, peaceful non-smoking activities.
But the white bear is visible from space.
It literally is. Satellite imagery from Bloomberg and other sources in the years since that promise has shown comprehensive upgrades to military facilities. We're talking anti-aircraft systems, hardened aircraft shelters, military-grade runways on islands like Fiery Cross Reef.
The exact things the no militarization promise was designed to deny.
Precisely. So the more they insist it's all for civilian purposes, the more the international community focuses its satellites and its attention on the military buildup they're trying to downplay.
It's a self-defeating statement.
It is, because it gives everyone else a very clear, simple way to check if you're telling the truth.
Now, to be fair, we should look at the other side too. The U.S. is definitely not immune to this. U.S. officials are constantly talking about maintaining AI leadership and using national security to justify the chip controls.
They are protesting their technological lead very, very loudly. But the contradiction, the vulnerability, shows up when the policy starts to wobble because of economic pressure.
Because the controls, which are supposed to hurt the competition, also hurt the bottom line of U.S. companies.
Right, and they risk backfiring by giving China this huge incentive to build its own alternatives even faster. I remember the debate around the decision to ease some of the controls, like allowing sales of slightly less powerful H200 chips for a share of the revenue.
A move that was immediately criticized by some as being self-defeating.
It was, because when your government has spent years talking about unassailable leadership and using this very strong national security language, any move to compromise, even if it's for pragmatic business reasons, looks incredibly contradictory.
It looks like an admission that maybe the lead wasn't so unassailable after all, or that maybe quarterly profits are more important than the stated security goals.
Exactly. The over-the-top proclamation of being number one just serves to put a giant spotlight on the moment you're forced to make a strategic compromise.
Yeah.
It makes you look vulnerable.
Okay, so this core problem suppression leading to reinforcement, it feels like it's just on hyper speed in the digital age, especially now with AI-generated content. It's been supercharged. The old idea of trying to hide information to make it go away now has a name, the Streisand effect. And it's basically the default setting of the internet, named after Barbara Streisand trying to get photos of her house taken down, which of course just made them go viral.
And now this leads to what we could call the fake news paradox. When a platform or a government body tries to fact-check something or label it as false information, it often has the opposite of the intended effect.
I see this all the time. Research, like what's been reported in the Washington Post, shows that for people who are already inclined to believe something, that false label is actually a badge of honor.
It's a validation. It becomes proof that the information must be true, that it hit a nerve with the powers that be. The logic is, if this was just nonsense, why would they be working so hard to discredit it? It's the forbidden fruit, but for information.
And AI is like pouring gasoline on this fire. It used to be hard to make convincing misinformation. Now the cost to generate thousands of deepfakes or slightly different versions of a conspiracy theory is basically zero.
Which means trying to suppress it is a losing game. You can't play whack-a-mole when the AI can generate 1 million new moles a second. And the result of all this is what you could call truth fatigue.
Where people just get exhausted trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and they just retreat into what they already wanted to believe in the first place.
The act of prohibiting the false information just strengthens the identity of the group that believes it. It makes them cling to their forbidden truth even harder. Let's talk about the most frightening and practical version of this, the voice cloning crisis. Because this is moving beyond suppressing an idea to suppressing someone's actual identity. This is the new front line, and the technology is scarily good and widely available. Modern voice models from companies like 11 Labs, they only need a tiny audio sample, sometimes just 3 seconds, to create a completely convincing clone of your voice.
A clone that's good enough to fool security systems.
Good enough to fool biometric systems.
Yeah.
Certainly good enough to fool your own family. The very idea of verifying someone by their voice, it sounds like you, it's fundamentally broken now.
And the crime stats back this up.
They do. Reports from Bloomberg show a more than 300% increase in AI voice-based scams just in 2025. Scammers call up, usually targeting older people, using a perfect clone of their grandchild's voice in a panic, asking for money.
It's terrifying. So what's the response from institutions when a fundamental pillar of communication just crumbles?
Well, the response, as detailed in the Financial Times, has been a kind of rapid retreat. Financial institutions are moving away from voice ID. They're adopting what they call multi-dynamic verification.
So needing multiple forms of proof at once.
Right. They're essentially giving up on voice as a reliable, standalone identifier. It's just too compromised.
And on the legal front, is anyone trying to actually ban this?
There's a lot of talk around laws like the No Fakes Act in the U.S., which tries to protect people from having their voice and likeness used without permission. But the tech is just moving so much faster than the law. How do you define unauthorized use when an AI can generate something new that you never said, but that sounds exactly like you?
So since the law is slow and prohibition is basically impossible, it comes down to personal defense. What can you, our listener, actually do about this?
You have to adopt a zero-trust mindset for digital communication. And honestly, the best defenses are sometimes the simplest. We strongly recommend establishing what you could call a family dark code.
A safe word.
A safe word, exactly.
Exactly.
A unique, non-obvious word or phrase that only your immediate family knows. If you get a panic call from a loved one asking for help, your first response has to be, "What's the code?" If they can't give it, you hang up and call them back on the number you know is theirs.
It's an analog defense against a perfect digital lie. You rely on a shared human secret that an AI can't know.
And one last thing on this, because culture plays a huge role in how people react to all these prohibitions.
How does it differ between, say, East and West?
In many collectivist-focused cultures, like in much of Asia, the main goal is to maintain social harmony and face. So the response to a ban, let's go back to Mickey's smoking story, is often to just move the forbidden activity into private channels.
So you don't challenge the rule publicly, you just find a workaround in a small group.
Exactly. You move the conversation to an encrypted WeChat or Line group. There tends to be more acceptance of things like AI content censorship, if it's framed as being for social order. The white bear is still there, but it's kept in a private cage.
Whereas in the West, where the focus is much more on individual rights and the right to know.
The response to a ban is often public confrontation. You see legal challenges, media investigations, protests. The act of suppression is seen as an attack on personal liberty, so there's this extreme vigilance against any kind of digital big brother.
But in both cases, the core mechanism is the same. The act of banning something just makes it more interesting and more sought after, whether that happens in public or in private.
The power of the forbidden fruit is universal. It's just the way we pursue it that changes.
Wow. Okay, that was an incredible journey. From a simple psychology experiment all the way to global diplomacy and deepfake scams. But that central idea is just so powerful and clear.
It really is. The most interesting and often the most truthful stories are found in the exact places where authorities are telling you not to look. Those big, loud declarations from powerful people or countries, they're not really statements of fact.
They're more like hidden maps. Maps that point you directly to their biggest fears, their biggest vulnerabilities. If a company is shouting about its unassailable leadership, you know they're worried about falling behind.
Yeah.
If a government is screaming, "No militarization," that's probably where you should point the satellite.
The truth is always in the protest. Which brings us to the final thought, the practical application for you. We've seen that just trying to force a prohibition, whether on a global scale or just in your own life, usually backfires.
So what's the better way? If we know suppressing the white bear just makes it stronger, what do we do instead?
The most effective form of control isn't about prohibition. It's about acceptance and choice. Think back to the diet example. Instead of saying, "I absolutely forbid myself from having chocolate," which just starts the fight in your head.
You acknowledge the craving, but you choose something else.
Yes. You reframe it. You say, "I see that chocolate. I recognize that it's appealing. But right now, I am choosing a different path for my health." You remove the no, you remove the reactants, and suddenly the forbidden fruit loses all of its special emotional power. You take back your autonomy without the battle.
And on a global scale, that would mean moving past just propaganda and denial toward a more honest assessment of reality.
It would. But as we all try to navigate this new world, this post-truth culture, where anything could be faked by AI, we're left with this enormous challenge. How do we even define what's real anymore?
That's the big question to sit with. When every image, sound, and text can be perfectly replicated, the only thing that AI can't copy is your own independent critical thinking. That becomes your only real defense.
So we'd encourage you, now more than ever, to be a critical consumer of news, of official statements, especially when you hear someone protesting just a little too much.
We really hope this has given you a powerful new lens to look at the world. And if you've seen an example of this recently, something that made you think, they doth protest too much, let us know. We'd love to hear your stories.
And please, for anyone concerned about the voice cloning crisis, seriously, go set up that family dark code. Security really does start at home. Next time on Sip and Talk, we are going to tackle a related, but maybe even heavier topic: AI's collective memory and the right to forget. When AI remembers every single thing about you forever, do you still have a right to a clean slate? It's a huge question about what it means to be human in the age of eternal data.
Please make sure you're subscribed to Sip and Talk so you don't miss it. And a huge shout out to our friend Mickey. You can find his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, for some great memes and travel vlogs.
We'll see you next time.